Hi, I'm Shannon Grissom. Are you looking to ignite your creativity? Or how about be inspired by a steady stream of muses? Welcome to Painterly Life, the podcast that celebrates those who create, inspire, and innovate. So whether you're looking to spark your next big idea, reignite your passion, or simply soak in some creative energy, this is the place for you. Painterly Life, where every guest is a new muse just for you. Welcome to the Painterly Life podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Grissom. Today's guest is award-winning artist Trowzers Akimbo, whose work is filled with color, movement, and the spirit of Venice Beach, where he grew up surrounded by creativity. Welcome, Trowzers.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, you grew up surrounded by art. Your mother and your grandfather, they were both artists. So can you tell me about your childhood and how that all evolved?
Yeah. So I'm sure I'm the first grandkid in the family, and the firstborn in my family, and so I think they were probably hoping that there would be some creativity. My mother and grandfather, actually, when I was in kindergarten, we had this assignment to draw something big and something small, and it turns out I was the only one that did two different animals. I did an elephant and a bird. And an actually elephant with his trunk stretched out, running to try to catch the bird landing on his trunk. And my kindergarten teacher decided it was frameable and put it up for open house. And I was hooked. I mean, wow. I just loved the celebrity that I got in my little kindergarten class of having my work up on the wall. And I was set. And then I think I've been an artist from then on, probably drawing on walls, which I shouldn't have been doing, and on around the board or electric train was mounted on. I drew a lot of train robberies and things like that my dad wasn't too happy about. But anyway, yeah. So it's been a lifelong thing for me.
So how, Venice is such an incredibly creative place, amazingly creative place. So how did that shape you?
Well, it wasn't the Venice that it is today. It was a little rougher back then, but it was very creative, and so I was so lucky because it was a creative center. A lot of art teachers in the system wanted to teach there. So we had just wonderful art teachers. And, the environment's just great. I mean, there's murals all over the place and graffiti all over the place, some really nice graffiti, paintings of whales on buildings and things like that. So it just drips creativity, and I had the best of teachers. So they really supported the arts, and even by the time I was in high school, they had pretty extended art classes. Like we had a watercolor class, a teacher that was just a watercolor teacher. So we had jewelry teachers and general teachers, but we had specialized teachers too. So it was a great place to grow up. Just really favored the arts.
Well, speaking of teachers, you had Betty Edwards and others. Was that through that time there, or did that come later?
That was it was in high school. Yeah. So she was she was Betty Blumenthal then. She wasn't married yet.
Okay.
She was just a very influential teacher, and the book was yet to come. So she hadn't written the book yet. But,
oh, wow. Okay.
But she had her methods, and she was just a great teacher. She gave me a lot of leeway, which I always loved in teachers. Gave me a lot of hall passes, yeah.
Did you need a lot of hall passes?
I was a wild kid, so yeah, especially on the high school. So, So I wanted a lot of hall passes. So I really was into art, and I've been into art my whole life. I just looked at books, every book I could find on art in the libraries. So when she was teaching art history, I knew most of what she was teaching on that level. So that's why she would give me the hall passes. It wasn't that I was being a delinquent, but I knew everything that she was going over. I did fine in all the tests. So she would allow me to go to the library or wherever I might. She didn't know where I was wandering, but wherever I was wandering. Anyway.
I mean, I can only imagine. I had her, I went through her whole book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And so to actually learn from her in person had to be incredible.
Yeah, yeah. And she's just a sweet, lovely lady and very cute. She was probably very young at that time, and the cuteness helped. But yeah, amazing teacher. Yeah, she went on to Long Beach State, I think, when she and actually got, I think, a degree in philosophy and psychology, and yeah, and the rest is kind of history with her. She was just amazing.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking about your high school. You were part of the prestigious CalArts program. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so another teacher who was really influential, Eleanor Pardo, she really wouldn't let me get away with anything and wanted to make sure that I did go on to art school. So while I was still in high school, she knew that we needed to build my portfolio so I would be ready for submission to all the art schools. We have great art schools in Southern California. CalArts was there. Well, Chenard is now CalArts. So Chenard was there. Art Center was there. Otis Pratt was there. And Long Beach State has an absolute wonderful art program. And she wanted to assure that I submitted to all those schools. So she made sure that as one of my art projects, that I made a portfolio. And then she made sure that it was filled with the right pieces. And she knew I needed life drawing. So she made an arrangement with Chenard at the time, CalArts, for me to go downtown and do life drawing from the model along with some of the registered students there. So I did that my last semester in high school and got my life drawing that way. And it was a wonderful experience. I loved the campus. And I was fortunate enough to get accepted to all the schools that I applied to. And I chose that school. I knew the campus. I loved their style. And they didn't have any dress standards, which was good for me. Didn't want to cut my hair. Didn't I wanted to wear Levi's, which Art Center wouldn't allow you to do. And they let you bring your dog to school. It was those were all factors that contributed to me going to Chenard over the other schools. But it was a wonderful, the best education. I went from a kid goofing around, undisciplined, and by the time I left 4 years later, I actually had a professional portfolio. I'm ashamed to show what I got in with compared to what I left with. And it was just, the thing about art school is, I mean, you can learn it all on your own. There's no doubt about it. But it's so concentrated when you go to an art school because you're being taught by teachers who have a life experience in art, but they also were instructed by people who had a life experience in art. And those people were instructed by someone. So you're standing on the shoulders of all these giants, and they really speed up the learning process. You get so much more brush or pencil mileage done in 4 years of concentrated effort that would take you, literally decades to do on your own. So I felt really fortunate. I mean, it's not like most colleges where you have classes here and there and you have days off and all that stuff. It's an 8-hour class. You have your academics in the morning. In an art school. I was fortunate I had a college prep major in high school, so I didn't have to go to junior college. So I could go right into a university. And you had your academics in the morning, and then you had your first 2 years, you had different lab classes, drawing, color and design, painting, all these different classes. But your second 2 years, you were drawing all day long. You had a model all day long. In my major, I was an illustration major. You had a model all day long. And then you were given assignments, which you had to do at home. So, I'd leave school, go to work, my job, work till about 11:30 at night, and then come home and start my assignment. And I got to tell you, many times the birds were chirping before I finished my assignment, and the sun was coming up. So,
wow.
Yeah, it is intense. It is intense. But I was young. I went right out of high school. So I was 18, 19 years old when I started. So you got the energy.
What kind of work did you do during that time?
I worked, I worked in a liquor store in Marina Del Rey, and so they owned all these liquor stores all over Venice and Marina Del Rey. Started out as a delivery guy, ended up as a manager of one of their stores, and I did that. I started when I was 16, and then did it all the way through art school. Supported me through art school until I graduated.
Did they give you instruction on the business side? Because you have a good balance between the business side and the creative side of art.
I don't think they gave you enough. There was one class of the artist in business or something like that. So I think anything I picked up is, I before I started painting, I spent, 40 years as a commercial artist. So that I think is where I got any kind of business sense I had. And, I worked in television and then I worked in advertising. And I think the advertising was really, really helpful, working with all these top advertising agencies across the United States. And if any business sense that I may have gotten, I got probably from them, from doing that work.
Well, I know you worked at NBC for a time. Can you tell me about your time there?
Yeah, it was really fun. It was very, very hard to leave because it was so much fun. Um, it's yeah. So I was a graphic artist there. So what we were responsible for was it was with NBC. So we had both a local affiliate, KNBC, the Los Angeles branch of NBC, and then we did the national work too. So we did everything that hung on the walls or went on screen on the air. So if it was a promotion for the holidays or an announcement about something, we did the artwork that went up on the walls. We also were responsible for body painting, so I did body painting on Laugh-In, on the show Laugh-In, and I did.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty funny, pretty nerve-wracking, because by that time I was about 21 years old, and my boss loved how nervous I got, so he would take me over to do body painting with him. To see, because you're painting these beautiful go-go dancers, Goldie Hawn, Judy Carn,
Yeah.
and it's nerve-wracking. They're celebrities. You're just a kid with a paintbrush, and then I also Johnny Carson moved his show to Los Angeles while I was there, and I was assigned to the show as the graphic artist on that show. So I got to do probably over 200 different pieces for the Tonight Show, the artwork that you would see going in and out of television commercials when the band was playing and things like that. Also, the Gong Show, I designed a lot of logos, and the Gong Show, I designed the logo for the Gong Show and was a graphic artist on that show. So it was pretty exciting. It was kind of like an extension of high school. It was a wild place with lots of people working there. Celebrities were always walking around. It was very difficult to leave, but for graphic artists, it was a union job, and they just didn't really pay enough long term to support a family. So when I actually was fortunate enough to receive an Emmy for some animated titles I did there, a show called NBC The First 50 Years, I couldn't get them to realize what I felt I was worth, and so I left and went into directing television commercials full time.
Wow. And so what was that experience like?
It was really fun. They were animation and live action. We did combination commercials and we did a lot of animation, and it was a company that was led by its founder, Bob Kurtz. It was called Kurtz and Friends Animation, who really wanted to felt we were all filmmakers and always wanted to break the mold, and we tried to never repeat ourselves. We were always trying to come up with groundbreaking stuff. We had clients like Levi Strauss and IBM and Toyota and McDonald's. We avoided the cereal commercials, so most all of our commercials were usually for 500 corporate 500 companies. And it was just a super creative environment. We won tons of awards. We entered a lot of competitions and were fortunate to win. I was there for about 12 years. I was very, very busy. I would have 10 projects on my drawing board at a time at different stages of development. I was a director designer there. So I did the storyboards, I designed the characters, I did all the extreme layouts, I designed the backgrounds, I work out my color models, and then do all the color markups for ink and paint, so they were there, and then I would do all the post production and direct any voice talent we needed. It was just really exciting. It was My work was still going on the air, not as often as it did in television, but it still went on the air whenever my commercials were shown, and it kind of culminated with me doing an experimental film there that was accepted into the Annecy International Animation Festival in Annecy, France. So it was,
Wow.
it was pretty fun. Oh yeah, I always illustrated at nights and on weekends. I did a lot of work for Sesame Street Workshop. I had like monthly pieces in their magazines, Sesame Street magazine, the Electric Company magazine. They used to print a lot of magazines back then. So yeah, I was pretty energetic. So I was doing illustration on the weekends and at nights, and directing television commercials during the week.
So, I know you watched a lot of cartoons from the 20s and 30s. Is that kind of coming full circle into some of your work today?
Yeah, definitely. I know television gets a bad rap, but for me, it was different. It was really inspirational. I used to, in the early days, in the 50s, when I was a little kid, I'd get up at the crack of dawn before my parents or any of my siblings were awake. And I'd watch, first it'd be a test pattern, and then a farm report would come on. And then they'd start showing all these old, then they start showing all these old black and white cartoons. Steamboat Willie was in there, but so was the Captain and the Cat. I can't remember the names of all of them, but lots of little mice with gloves on running around, and I just really enjoyed it. I was an animation fiend. I watched the Disney shows, Disney's World of Color, and before it was just called, I think, Walt Disney Presents. I watched all those things and was an avid student of everything they were teaching. It's actually, I didn't study animation in art school. Everything I learned about animation, I learned watching Disney and buying Disney books and practicing animation as a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. So I actually even built them. I don't know if you know what a multiplane camera is, but it's a camera that it's a camera they developed for Pinocchio, which is basically a tower of sheets of glass that they could put background scenes on and animation scenes on, and then they could take the camera and move it from the top of this tower down towards the floor, and as you pass through different parts of the animation, they take the glass out and you could continue going. And they got this real, it's before 3D, but they got a real 3D effect that I think you first saw in Pinocchio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I knew enough about that later I had one built for a commercial we made. So, and that's all stuff I picked up at 9 or 10 years old because I was so excited about animation. So it's definitely worked into my work. I mean,
that's great.
Yeah, I think you can see it in I think you can see it in the work that I do today, in the abstracted paintings that I do today.
Well, and you've done some completely photorealistic work, and then you shifted over to abstract, and I think you kind of go back and forth. But your vibrant, beautiful color is in everything you do. So what are you working on now?
Oh, right now I actually did worked on a representational nude from a live model that we had with this group that you used to be president of. Yosemite, we used to be Yosemite Western artists, now it's Yosemite Sierra artists. And we had a live model, and I did the representational piece, and now I'm working on an abstracted version of that pose. So actually, I was painting abstractly first, so I hadn't really painted representationally since I was before I went into art school. So I used to do some oils and stuff, and I painted pretty representationally when I was a kid. I also did a lot of cartoons when I was a kid. But when I started painting as a fine artist, it was all abstraction. That's all I did. And then I learned about that group that had these live models every week up here where I live in Oakhurst. And I I showed up there with an iPad and a stylus, not knowing what I was going to be in for. I knew they had a live model. That was the attraction. And I got there and I saw everybody was a representational artist there. There was no one doing anything but realistic work. So I didn't want to frighten anybody with what I was doing. I didn't want the torches and the pitchforks coming out to drive me out of there. So I worked representationally for the first time in years and years, and I kind of enjoyed it. And I'm going, you know what, I think I might do some of this for a while, and it's stuck with me. So I kind of do both. And if it's a unique pose, like, we don't get nude models very often. Most of our models are clothed. So when I do, I try to take advantage of it and do both a representational and a abstracted version of that pose, because the poses are few and far between. I do the same thing when I set up a still life. If I take all the time to set up all the lighting and everything for a still life, for a representational piece, I'll do that, and then I'll usually do an abstraction from that same pose, from that same setup. I try to get the most out of it. But the abstraction came first. That's what I was doing first, and I did that for a long time exclusively. And if it wasn't for that group, I probably never would have done any representational work.
Wow, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that, because when I first met you, you were doing the representational, and then you switched to the abstract. And I have to tell everybody that Trowzers is one of the people that I hear in my head when I'm painting. I learned so much just standing in the room with him. He's amazing.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind.
So,
that's very kind.
Thank you. So I'm thinking about your color palette.
Yes.
And you've described it as being inspired by your Hispanic roots. You have lovely color. So can you tell me about all that?
That's what I'm told, is that it looks very Hispanic to Hispanic people. My mother's my maternal grandfather was from Mexico, and so my mother's maiden name was Gomez. So I'm 25% Hispanic myself, and I grew up with my grandfather was from a large family. He had 4 sisters, and a lot of them were still living in Mexico. And when they would come to the United States to visit, they would always bring me these great toys, little carved Mexican animals, which I still continue to collect now, and super colorful. And we have these great 4th of July picnics at his house where all of his family would come up from Mexico, and just colorful stuff. And then, Southern California has got an amazing light. I mean, it attracts people from all around the world. David Hockney, I understand, when he first visited the United States and saw Southern California, he had to move. The light was just amazing. I actually lived in southern New Hampshire, freelancing as an illustrator for about 3 years, and it's very, very high in the hemisphere, and it was depressing to me for a while, and I didn't realize why until for quite a while, and the realization finally came to me that it never got any brighter, even at 12 noon there, than 3 o'clock in Southern California. So so the light is phenomenal there. And I'm a lifelong surfer. I started when I was, not lifelong, but I started when I was 13 years old. And so I spent all this time, and prior to that, I spent all this time at the beach. So the light at the beach and the green water and the colorful bathing suits and all that stuff, it just says color, color, color. And I really can't help myself. That's just how I paint. I can't take color out of stuff. My wife is a fabric artist and a potter, and she uses a very muted palette, but I can force myself into that if I do color sketches and stuff like that ahead of time. But my natural inclination is just to put lots of color in there. Like I said, I just can't help myself.
Well, that's a good thing.
Oh, well, thank you.
That's interesting. I'm thinking back to, you're welcome. I'm thinking about your toys, and then that makes me visualize some of your paintings. Do those toys morph into some of the creatures that you have in your paintings?
They
in
affect
your
it.
abstraction work?
Oh, they definitely affect it. They definitely affect it. I mean, I've got a huge
Yeah.
collection that surround. I'm working in a temporary studio right now, but they surround my normal studio. They surround the ceiling, so I've got shelves up by the ceiling, and it's packed full of Day of the Dead pieces, paper mache pieces, and carved wooden pieces. I've got a huge collection, and yeah, they're very inspirational to me. So yeah, they definitely affect me. They definitely affect. I use with my abstraction, I use a technique developed by Picasso and Braque that they used in Cubism, but they also used it in other things later called a multiple viewpoint perspective, where I consider my subject matter from all sides, and I feel free to take things from all sides and put them into one two-dimensional painting. So you may see the front of a coyote and the rear end of a coyote at the same time. That's what I strive for, and that's what I kind of build the designs of my abstractions. That's how I build the designs of my abstractions, is by taking elements from all sides of my subject matter and putting them all together into one two-dimensional image. And there's a lot of that going on in the folk art that I have, probably accidentally in the folk art, but it still inspires me. And the patterns and everything that they put on them, I try to incorporate those into my paintings as well.
I'm thinking, would it be fair to say that it's interesting that you're considering all sides, multiple viewpoints in your abstractions? But I'm wondering if the way your mind works, are you considering multiple viewpoints even in your traditional?
No, so when I do traditional stuff, I kind of think of those as um, artist eye calisthenics, and that's why I continue to do them,
Ah,
because they force me. It keeps my artist's eye fresh and keeps my artist's eye in
okay.
tuned. So when I go into that, I'm basically um, doing what I feel every artist should be doing is I forget what I'm painting and I pay attention to the shapes, the values, and the colors.
Yeah.
And then I stand back and magically it looks like what's in front of me. So, but when I'm painting it, I'm not really looking at it um, as a still life or as a landscape or as a portrait. I'm looking at the shapes of the values and the colors
Yeah.
on there. I'm putting these patches together, and if I put them together in the right way, they end up looking like what's in front of me. So I do truly think of my representational painting as is exercise to keep my artist's eye sharp.
Mm. You described yourself periodically as a bit of a sponge. What's seeped into your artist life lately?
Yeah, no, it's well over the time. Everything I see, I realize that I see things differently than everybody, and that my right brain um, is way out of proportion to my left brain. In fact, I was a math major in high school. I was a heck because when I went to high
Oh,
school
wow.
and I was college prep, they wouldn't accept at that time. They wouldn't accept art or music as a major if you wanted to do college
Mm.
preparatory work, and if you wanted to skip junior college and go right into the university. So I had choices. I could do foreign language, I could do math, or I could do social studies based on my grade point average and how I was doing in those subjects. And I chose math. But I realized later in life that I was not doing, because they wanted you to prove all your answers and do everything on paper. I was fine. But I realized much later I was doing things like spelling and mathematics in my right brain and not my left brain where you're supposed to do all that kind of calculus.
Oh.
So I've got this little flaw when I do math or when I spell of I basically am doing it in the air in my brain. I don't do those things like you're supposed to do in math where you take tens and hundreds and single digits and average things and then put the remainders on there to do math. I'm actually doing something like I'm actually doing them as if I'm doing them on a chalkboard. And I do the same thing when I spell.
Ah.
And that's not really how you're supposed to do it. But I think I drew and painted so much when I was a kid that my right brain, by the time I hit public school, my brain was doing everything with the right brain. So I've got this tape recorder that's going a video recorder that's going all the time, and so everything I see, if it's interesting to me, gets recorded. So I have a very difficult time sticking with any one style when I paint and when I draw, and I always have. It's why it was why working in television, where I had to do a bunch of different styles, and working in animation, where I had to do a bunch of different styles, was ideal for me. But I have a really hard time as I'm a painter, not coming up with a bunch of different styles. I try to stick with kind of the two approaches I have now, the representational approach I have and the abstraction approach I have. But I would love to paint like Van Gogh, and I would love to paint like Matisse, and I would love to paint like you name it, Monet, Manet. So that's where I say I'm a sponge. Everything I see, if I see a nice section of graffiti on a wall, I record it, and it's there, and it may show up in one of my paintings. And any new artists I see, if there's something there that I really like, I store it in there, and it comes out later. So I feel I'm fortunate that way. I remember if you ask someone, even an artist, to draw a tricycle or a bicycle or a motorcycle just out of their head, you'd be surprised at the difficulty that a lot of them have. I don't. I mean, I can, it may not be completely accurate, but it's accurate enough to be an illustration in a book. And I found that out when I was an illustrator. So yeah, that recording device is going all the time for me. I feel very fortunate.
Wow. Yeah, you are very fortunate that you can that it's retained and you can see it and you can work from that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've got these I'm always being bombarded by these influences.
So, what do you think creativity has taught you about life in general?
Well, it's taught me that I pity anyone who isn't doing something that they love wholeheartedly. So what it's taught me is that if you've got a passion, any kind of a passion, you just have to go for it, and trust that it will work. It'll work out for you. It'll work out for you. It may not go exactly as you wanted it to go. It's important to roll with the punches. I started out wanting to do illustration in magazines and books, but I had this path in television graphics through animation and actually computer games and all these things as an artist, and it kept me working as an artist my entire adult life. So I think what it's taught me is if you really have a passion for something, and in my case creativity, you can make it'll work if you just stick with it. And I guess what I've learned from it is that it's so fulfilling. I've never or rarely said, "Oh, I got to go to work." I rarely. I mean, yeah, I have the fear of the empty canvas like everybody, but I love it so much, and that I basically just make myself start working, start putting the strokes on the brush, and then pretty soon I'm into it and it's going for me. But it's just it makes your life fulfilling. Creativity has taught me that, yeah, in my case, it gave me a completely fulfilling life. Every day is wonderful.
Life happens to all of us. How do you fill the well and keep yourself motivated?
You know what? I don't need.
Or do you have any trouble with that?
I don't have a problem with that.
You don't need to.
No, when I was young, I guess it was more difficult. I can remember I'd go down a path and I couldn't fix it, a painting path, illustration path or something, and I couldn't fix it, and I'd have to tear it up and start over again. But with all the mileage I've had with a brush and a pencil, now I can kind of work my way out of any corner. So I don't think I ever get those blocks. I just keep working until I'm happy with it. I do a lot of scraping out and repainting and stuff like that, but that's all part of the process. Mm-hmm. And I just realized it's going to work if you just keep going at it. So I don't get I'm lucky. I hope I never do, but so far I haven't had a block, and I've been at it for quite a while.
Do you paint every day?
I try to. Yeah, I try to. I try to get into the studio at 4 o'clock every day and paint till 8 o'clock. Um, and I've got a small little ranch up here, so it takes a lot of work, and life takes a lot of work. You've got a lot of other things to do,
Right.
but I kind of try to dedicate a very specific block of time every day and stick to it, and that's kept me productive. So everybody in my family knows that 4 o'clock I'm going to go into the studio and I won't show up again until 8. And yeah, that's worked really well for me. And I recommend it for everybody. I don't care what
Yep.
time it is, but I try to find whatever amount of time you've got. Uh, Try to find a block of time every day, and maybe it's every other day. If you can't do it every day, but stick with it. Even if it's one day a week, but stick with it. Go back, go. That same time, go in there. That's your time, and stick with it. If you're having trouble, just keep working on it. Don't say, "Oh, I'm not in the mood today." That's the worst thing for artists, I feel, is to only paint when you're in the mood. And I experienced that when I was younger. When I was a kid, I only painted when I was in the mood, and I didn't get as much work done. So you just don't let yourself off the hook. Go for it.
I agree. There's amazing things that have happened when I was tired and dragging my butt, and I just start painting, and it's like praying.
Yeah,
And if I hadn't shown up, it wouldn't have happened. So it's a matter of showing up and just keep going.
yeah, and the energy
Yeah.
comes. I mean, I've been exhausted, like you said, on particular days, and you get in there, and the adrenaline starts pumping, and yeah,
Yeah.
you're just throwing paint.
That's awesome. Well, we're getting close to the end of time here, but I was thinking, is there any words you would want to tell somebody who's just starting out about the creative process, or what you wish you knew when you were younger?
Um, well, when I was younger, I wish I'd had that. I wish I'd known that it's important to set up a specific time to paint and to stick with that time and to dedicate yourself to that time. Um, I remember I've seen kids who are really highly supported by parents when they were young, like 9, 10 years old. And they even set up studios for them in a garage. And, um, and those kids productive, were productive at a young age, and you have a leg up on the rest of us who don't really get serious about it until later. And I'd say if you love painting when you were a kid, get serious about it. It's never been easier to study art with the internet. When we were kids,
Yeah.
you had to go to the library and check out books, and they didn't have every book on every artist, and everything's up there. You can find, everything up there. So take advantage of it. And, if you, it's never too early to get started in art, and stick with it, because pencil and brush mileage is how you become better and more proficient. There's no shortcut. You just got to
Yes.
do it, do it, do it. So the earlier you start and the more you do it, the better you're going to get, and the faster you're going to get better.
Now, how can people find you online?
I'm at trowsersakimbo.com. And
Okay.
I've got links to all my social media on my website along the bottom of every
Great.
page. So yeah, if they just start and Trowzers is spelled Trowzers is how I spell trousers. Um, and so if they just go to trowsersakimbo.com, yeah, you can, all my contact information's there as well as my work.
Well, great. Thank you for being here, Trousers. You're incredibly inspiring.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for that compliment.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, this is another wrap of Painterly Life. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share so that I can send you more inspirational episodes. That's a wrap. We'll see you next time.